If you're looking for a tutorial showing how to instrument your Ingress controllers and Nginx web servers, then this episode is for you. Welcome back to the Is It Observable YouTube channel. Today's episode is going to be part of the OpenTelemetry series and the Nginx series, where we covered lots of various topics. If you pay attention, I recently released an episode about the Nginx instrumentations, Webserver, and Ingress controller. In that episode, I explained the process when using a traditional web server, and then we covered the feature provided by the Nginx Ingress controller. Last, we covered the auto-instrumentation feature provided by the OpenTelemetry Operator and how to use it with the Nginx web servers. Today's episode, it will be focused on providing a tutorial helping you to instrument your web servers and Ingress controllers. If you enjoyed today's content, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. So let's see what we're going to learn out of this episode. I will start by making a very short introduction, adding a few details about the instrumentations of your web servers using the OpenTelemetry Operator. We will then describe the technical environments of our tutorial, and then we walk through various steps of the tutorial by looking at the requirements, the Ingress instrumentation, and last, the instrumentation of the web server using the OpenTelemetry Operator. Before we jump into the tutorial, I wanted to give extra details with the OpenTelemetry Operator to instrument our web server. So I've tried to utilize this feature using the standard Nginx image, and I failed miserably. So when building this tutorial, I realized that this instrumentation is currently only compatible with the community versions of Nginx. So to be 100% clear, if you're planning to instrument your Nginx web servers, you will need to use the community editions of Nginx. Then you will need to follow the steps. So step 1, defining the instrumentation CRD. In this CRD, we will express the sampling decisions, the exporter URL, the trace context, and then we can specify a few Nginx settings where we could define, for example, the batch size for each worker, the name of the service, the name of the span, and so on. So we simply need to deploy this instrumentation CRD in the namespace where our future Nginx server will be deployed. And then we can move to the step 2. So where we adjust our Nginx deployment by mounting the Nginx configuration folder and the right annotations to notify the operator that we want to inject the Nginx Otel module. Step 3, make sure that your OpenTelemetry exporter, so the collector or something else, is available and running. Step 4, we deploy our Nginx workload, and then from there, we will be able to get the traces and metrics that we need. In this tutorial, we'll cover 2 scenarios: instrumentation of the Ingress controllers and instrumentation of Nginx community web servers in a Kubernetes cluster. In this tutorial, we'll need a couple of things. We need a Kubernetes cluster, the CertManager, which is a requirement for the OpenTelemetry Operator. So of course, we will deploy the OpenTelemetry Operator. We will deploy the Nginx Ingress controller. We will have a Dynatrace tenant for this specific tutorial. We will deploy the Dynatrace operator just to get the resource usage of our pods and workload within our cluster. We will need 2 applications. In fact, about 3. So we will first the OpenTelemetry demo application that will expose the endpoints using an Ingress role. And then we will have 2 simple web servers just delivering static pages. So we will look at the specific settings required to enable tracing on our Ingress controller and the annotation that we need to add in our Ingress roles. We then look at the instrumentation CRD to instrument the Nginx web servers. We look at the annotations added to the Nginx workload. And last, we will look at the telemetry data that is produced and exposed in Observability backend.
Like every tutorial that we deliver at Is Observable, there is always a GitHub repository. And we're looking here at the repo related to the Nginx instrumentation, covering the web server on one end and Ingress controller on the other end. Like mentioned, we are not gonna do the traditional web server, but utilize the OpenTelemetry Operator to achieve this instrumentation. So, like usual, here we're gonna rely on Dynatrace tenant. So if you don't, you can click on this link, and that will bring you to start a new free trial. And you will put your email address and get a tenant in a few minutes. So First thing, you will have to get the Dynatrace tenant URL from a URL perspective. So once you have your tenant, copy this URL here with the ID. So there's an id.live.dynatrace.com. Copy that piece because you will need it to deploy the environment. Second thing, we're gonna deploy the Dynatrace operator. That requires a couple of tokens to deploy this operator, and then we need ingest tokens with, of course, OpenTelemetry, because we're going to send OpenTelemetry traces. So how do you do this? Very simple. You click on apps here and you can search for token here, token, and you see access token. So I already have created those 2 tokens, so I don't have to create them anymore. So here you can see I have the operator token and then ingest token. So if I expand the operator token, I have the actual scope that I have described in the README file, and same thing for the ingest token. So make sure you have those scope added in those tokens. Once you create the token, you will see the value once. So I really recommend to copy the value, and that's why we have variables here. So save them into variables, and those variables will be used for the script. So once you deploy the scripts, it will go through several stuff. Deploy the Ingress controller, a couple of things. So here I have a similar environment, but I have more workload on it. So if you look at the namespace, you should get basically the Dynatrace namespace that has the Dynatrace operator, the CertManager, because it's a requirement for the OpenTelemetry Operator, which is here. We have, of course, the Nginx example that will basically where we're going to deploy the very basic static web pages on Nginx. We have the Otel demo app producing OpenTelemetry traces, and we have the empty shop that is instrumented by the one agent. And one last thing is the Ingress. Where is the here? And Nginx Ingress Nginx. Here it is, which is for our ingresses, and all the collector will be in the default namespace. So one important thing, so if I bring the deployment bash scripts that I'm using here, you will see that in the line 112 here, I am basically, after deploying the Ingress, I am applying it, and this basically is enabling the OpenTelemetry plugin on Ingress. And you can see that I'm also putting some trust incoming span, some default configurations, and also you can see here I am already pointing to a specific OpenTelemetry collector URL here. This is where I'm enabling it. But you could basically avoid, if you don't want to do this. I mean, here in the script will do it. But if you go to the if you get the config map, you can see that we have this Ingress controller config map, so we can edit it. And you can see that the most important piece is this piece, and also of course the actual name of the collector and the actual name of the service. So again, if you deploy your own Ingress controller by yourself, make sure to add those properties, and then that will make the module enabled and so on. So the next thing is, I didn't show you, but when I deploy the Otel demo applications, so if you go to OpenTelemetry folder, there is a deploy, which is the deployment of the OpenTelemetry demo. And if we expand here and we go to, I think it's in the bottom, yeah, here it is. We have an Ingress role for this Otel demo applications. So we have the host, the role, then we're going to serve the front-end proxy. But what is most important here is the 2 annotation I mentioned before. So here I am basically enabling for this Ingress role the instrumentation of OpenTelemetry, and I get the trust incoming span. So that is important aspects. That is done through this deployment. So keep in mind that we don't gonna do any annotations. This is done directly from the deployment perspective. Same thing from from Ipsa Shop as well. Ipsa Shop has the same approach. If you scroll down, we also have those Ingress controllers available. And like I said, we need collectors, because of course the traces will be sent to those collectors, to a collector. So if you go to the default namespace, we can see that we have 3 collectors. So we have collect Otel D, daemon set, and Otel is stateful set. So that's why if you look at the services for those collectors, we have of course services for the daemon set and one for the stateful set. And the traces is obviously managed by the stateful set, and the log perspective is more on the daemon set. So that's the collector that is going to run. So make sure that those collectors are running. If they are not running, then obviously you won't get any traces from this tutorial. What we want to do is basically see, so here we have load testing components running on the Hipster shop and the OpenTelemetry demo, which means there are always traffic running in this cluster, in this environment. So, which means here, if you go to services in Dynatrace, this is basically showing you all the services from an application perspective. So everything that has a trace and so on will be here. And which means I can see here the OpenTelemetry services, and I can see the Hipster shop services. But we may expect as well a specific one for our Ingress controller. Remember, we had defined a name for this service. Well, it was Ingress and Nginx, and which is here. So if I click on this, this is going to show us or the service page of Dynatrace from this OpenTelemetry service. So we can see the actual service metrics from this is extracted from a trace perspective, the throughput and the endpoint, because at the end all the ingress are basically going through slash, so no surprises. And as expected, we can see the one is basically pointing to the Hipster shop here. The other one is the front-end proxy. We can see that it's the load generator that it hits. So we can see the incoming traffic to the ingress and the outgoing traffic to the ingress. And this is an extra application that I've added, which is not part of this tutorial, but we can see that this one is also exposed from the ingress perspective. So at the end, you have the major differences. So which is great in a sense, because here if I click on this particular trace called /cart, I will basically open the distribute trace produced from the application perspective, which is here. I think it's the Hipster shop, and so it's a mix of instrumentation from one agent's perspective and from OpenTelemetry. And you can see here that we have the first span here is obviously the ingress that has produced this. So we can see the different details. But now if I want, I can still search for another trace. If I go back to the search screen, and I can basically, I may have OpenTelemetry done, for example, let's pick up API cart, this one, which is the OpenTelemetry demo. So if I click on this one, I will have only traces from OpenTelemetry demo application. So you can see that we have this ingress going through this ingress here, front-end proxy, which is the role. And you can see that we have a couple of details. We have the HTTP protocols. I have a couple of, I can add those resource attribute that is not stored at the moment, but you can see we have the zone. We have a couple of informations that will help us to differentiate from a different component perspective. So we can see the ingress perspective, and then we have the actual trace to route this to the actual service. So we have a couple of details, which is really interesting. So that's why I think enabling it, and of course making the right sampling decisions, will provide extra details to the actual trace that we are producing. So here in this repo, you can open Nginx folder. We have the Nginx deploy, and we have the basic. So the basic, what it is, it's just I'm loading a really basic HTTP index HTML page on 2 web servers. So we have, this is deployment 2, this is deployment 1. So nothing fancy. It's just to show to have like a web server running. So the page itself, I've decided to deploy it through a config map on both web servers, because we're gonna have 2 web servers. And then side of that, what is important, I have on side of that the Nginx conf, because you need to load an Nginx configuration file into your Nginx web server. So this is nothing specific. It's just includes the Nginx conf, a couple of details, the index, HTML pages, and so on and so forth. Now, if we move to the other file, the Nginx deploy, here we have actually the deployments of those web servers. So for deployment 1 corresponds to the web server 1, and we have the other one for the server 2. So deployment, and then we have a service to, of course, expose our Nginx. And then if you scroll down to the bottom, I have also created Ingress rules. So here we can see that we have these Ingress here, and this Ingress will basically allow me to expose this web server out of the cluster. So which means we will have a combination of Ingress instrumentation plus the traditional Nginx web server instrumented. So here nothing has been enabled, nothing. So let's look at the various details. So the first thing which is important, like I said, I need to mount the config map for the Nginx conf. That's one thing. And I need to mount the actual web page. So that's why I have this Nginx config, which is, I could have called it differently, to be honest, to make it more simpler, which is the web page that we're going to load. And that's pretty much it. The other aspect which is really important is that here I'm not using the official Nginx image. I tried it a couple of times, and for some reason it fails. It doesn't run properly. So that's why after a few investigations, it seems that the OpenTelemetry Operator requires to have this community versions of Nginx. So make sure you use the community versions if you want to have traces produced from a web server perspective. So that's the main things. So first, load the config file, use and community versions of Nginx, and that's pretty much it on the Nginx deployments. But I will touch base on the annotation in a few seconds. What is important here, if you expand the OpenTelemetry folder, which is on the left side here, we have instrumentation objects. And then the instrumentation object, I have two of them, one from web server 1 and one from web server 2. What I'm doing here is basically configuring how Nginx will be instrumented by the operator. So I define the exporter. So again, it's the same OpenTelemetry collector that we use for the Ingress. I define the propagation, so trace context W3C. I define sampling decision, so here it's 100%. Again, adjust this base if you use it in production. And you can see here, from here, it's going to be specific to Nginx. And like explained in the previous episode, here we have the attributes with a couple of variables. And here I'm putting the name of the service. That will be from the spans perspective. We will have this name Nginx1, and that's why we have Nginx2 on the other hand. So which means I will have to deploy those two instrumentation objects in the namespace related to our web server. And the other things that we need to do, so we have instrumentation 1 here and Nginx instrumentation, Nginx2 instrumentation on the other hand. So which means if we go back to the Nginx deploy, we can see that we have on the specific annotations provided by the OpenTelemetry Operator. And you can see here, if we had only one instrumentation CRD, I will put it true. But here, because we have two of them, I am saying, okay, this here, you're going to use the instrumentation object 1. And then if we scroll down to the other web server, you can see that here we're going to use the instrumentation object 2. So that's basically how the operator will figure out how it's going to instrumenting. So in my case, I have already deployed everything. So if you go here, you can check. So we have the two deployments, 1 and 2. And if we describe them, let's describe them briefly. We can see a couple of things. So we can see that we have the Otel Nginx agents that has been added here. So this, and then we have, of course, our configurations. So that's in terms of volumes. And then if we scroll up, we can see that we have the container Nginx, the one from our application perspective. And if we scroll even up, we will technically see that we have an Otel agents attached Nginx. This is done through the operator. You can see that there are a couple of things, couple of arguments that adds the right modules into this container. And you can see here we have a couple of environment variables that has been added here. So the Nginx enable on our exporter. So this has been passed by our instrumentation objects. We have the namespace and we have the service here, Nginx one, remember. So this is done automatically through the operator. And then of course we have a couple of scripts, but I'm not going to go on all those details, but this is what makes the traces produced by on the web server side. So now let's make some traffic. So like I said, first deploy the instrumentation objects and then deploy the config map for the web server and then the actual deployment. So now let's make some if I do, here it is. So that's the one, say deployment one. And then if we go to the second one, we have this deployment 2. So our Nginx is responding. So let's do another traffic on 1. So now if you go back to Dynatrace and you click on the service page, you can scroll down and we have our Ingress controller that we had before. And then now we have Nginx deployment 1 and Nginx deployment 2. So I can click on Nginx deployment 1, so which means we have 2 traces or something like this. We have no failure, that's great. And we can see that then the incoming traffic is the Ingress controller and then goes to that web server. So if I click, for example, on this trace here, the slash, which is what we did. So we can see that we start with the Ingress controller perspective and then we jump into our web server. And we can see that there are all the various modules that I was referring to on the previous episode. So the real IP, the rewrite modules, the limits, every one of those are producing traces. Again, so here I have not added any specific span attributes, but you can check the traces. So you get a couple of details about the Nginx. You can see we have the details about the web server, the time is spent on the web server. So at the end, it gets a couple of details. So if you have any Nginx doing some whatever access modules or any proxying or whatever, or rewrites or something like this, then you can get the actual time spent here on those steps. And I think that is quite useful. So
that's it for today's episode related to the tutorial on the Nginx and web server and Ingress controller. So as you can see, it's very easy to implement, specifically on the Ingress aspects. It's just a feature to enable and configure through the config map of the Ingress. And then it's just a matter of adding the right annotations to the Ingress rules that you're creating. And once you have that, then you'll be able to get traces and details with all the semantic conventions that we expect from an HTTP perspective. On the Nginx instrumentation, I cover mainly the Kubernetes aspects with the operator because it's so convenient. And I think it's very simple, just with using an extra CRD, the instrumentation CRD, to get the traces produced and get the details that we need from a web server perspective. And again, like I said before in the introduction, keep in mind that this is only possible and available if you use the Nginx Community Edition. If you're planning to use the official Nginx image or Nginx Plus, this instrumentation CRD won't work. So keep in mind that you will use the Community Editions instead. So if you enjoyed today's content, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. So see you soon for another episode. Bye.